The storm came without warning, the kind that bent trees and turned the forest paths into rivers of mud. Snow mixed with rain, and the wind howled through the dark pines surrounding the Blackthorn stronghold like a warning no one dared ignore. It was in the middle of this storm that the guards at the gate heard something strange. Not the growl of an enemy wolf, not the horn of an approaching threat, but a small, broken voice calling out from beyond the tree line. "Please, someone help me." The two guards exchanged a look before one of them lifted his torch and stepped forward. There, half collapsed against the stone wall, was a woman. Her clothes were torn and soaked through, her dark hair plastered to her pale face, and her bare feet were bleeding from the frozen ground. She looked as though she had been walking for days, maybe longer. "I mean no harm," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I only need shelter. Please." The guards hesitated. Strangers were rarely welcomed so easily into Blackthorn territory, especially not ones who appeared out of nowhere in the middle of a storm. But there was something about her, something neither of them could explain, that made it impossible to turn her away. "Wait here," one of them said, before disappearing into the stronghold to fetch the Alpha King himself. Cain Blackthorn was not a man who came to the gates for just anyone. As the Alpha King of one of the strongest packs in the region, his time was too valuable, his responsibilities too heavy, to be troubled with every wanderer who stumbled onto his land. But something in the way his guard spoke, breathless and unsettled, made him rise from his seat without argument. He walked out into the storm with long, purposeful strides, his dark eyes sharp and alert, searching for whatever had disturbed the guards enough to interrupt him. Then he saw her. The moment his gaze met hers, something inside him shifted violently, like the earth had cracked open beneath his feet. His breath caught. His heart, which had been steady and controlled for years, suddenly pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. Mate. The word rose in his mind unbidden, undeniable, the ancient pull of the bond snapping into place between them, as though it had been waiting all this time for exactly this moment. He had long since given up hope of finding his fated mate. He had told himself, more than once, that perhaps the bond had chosen no one for him, that he was destined to rule alone, and yet here she was, standing before him in the rain, shivering, frightened, and utterly unaware of what she had just done to him. "Bring her inside," Cain said, his voice rough. "Now." The healers were called immediately. Elira, as she introduced herself once she had been wrapped in warm blankets and given something hot to drink, could not remember much of anything. She knew her name. She knew she had been walking through the forest for what felt like days, but when asked where she came from, who her family was, why she had been alone in such dangerous territory, her expression only clouded with confusion. "I don't know," she admitted quietly, staring down at her hands. "I've tried to remember, but there's nothing there, just fog." Cain watched her from across the room, arms crossed, his expression unreadable to anyone who didn't know him well. But those who did know him, especially his beta, Dorian, could see the tension coiled tightly in his shoulders. "You cannot possibly mean to keep her here," Dorian said once they were alone, his voice low and urgent. "She appears out of nowhere, in a storm, with no memory of who she is? Cain, think about what you're doing. This could be a trap." "She's my mate, Dorian." The words hung heavy in the air. Dorian's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more, though the distrust in his eyes did not fade. Over the following days, Elira slowly regained her strength. The color returned to her cheeks, and though her memories remained frustratingly out of reach, small things began to surface at unexpected moments. She hummed a tune one evening while helping the kitchen staff prepare a meal, a melody none of the young wolves recognized, but one that made an elderly servant drop the plate she was carrying in shock. "Where did you learn that song?" the old woman asked, her voice shaking. Elira blinked, startled. I don't know. It just came to me." The old woman said nothing more that night, but Cain noticed the way she watched Elira from a distance afterward, her expression a strange mixture of grief and disbelief. Then there was the locket. It had been hidden in the lining of Elira's tattered cloak, so small and worn that no one had noticed it during her initial care. It was only when Cain insisted on having her belongings properly cleaned and returned to her that a young servant discovered it. tucked carefully into a hidden seam, as though someone had wanted to make certain it would never be found by accident, only by someone who knew exactly where to look. Cain turned the locket over in his palm, studying the crest engraved into its tarnished silver surface. His stomach dropped. It was the old royal crest of House Blackthorn, not the crest his family used now, forged in the aftermath of the coup that had claimed the throne over 2 decades ago, but the original crest, the one that had belonged to the royal line before it was slaughtered in a single, bloody night. He found Alira in the garden, sitting quietly beneath a bare winter tree, and held the locket out to her without a word. She took it with trembling hands, and as her fingers closed around it, her breath hitched. Her eyes filled with tears she couldn't explain. "I feel like I've held this before," she whispered. "I feel like it belongs to me, but that doesn't make sense." "Does it?" Cain said nothing, but the look in his eyes told her he was beginning to suspect it made more sense than either of them wanted to admit. It was the old healer, Mabel, who finally confirmed what Cain had feared and hoped in equal measure. She had served the royal family before the coup, one of only a handful who had survived that terrible night, and she had never stopped grieving the loss of the young princess who vanished without a trace, smuggled away by a loyal nursemaid who gave her life to protect the child. Mabel took one look at the locket, then gently brushed aside the hair at the base of Alira's neck, revealing a small, crescent-shaped birthmark, hidden just beneath her hairline. The old woman's hands began to shake. Tears welled in her eyes. "It's her," Mabel whispered. "It's truly her. Princess Elowen. She's alive." The stronghold fell into stunned silence when the truth spread. Alira, the frightened stranger who had begged for shelter in the storm, was Princess Elowen, daughter of the murdered king and queen, the rightful heir to the Blackthorn throne who had disappeared the very night her parents were killed. For years, everyone had assumed she was dead. Her survival changed everything. Some among the pack rejoiced, seeing her return as nothing short of a miracle, proof that the old bloodline had not been entirely extinguished. Others grew uneasy, uncertain what her return meant for Cain's position as Alpha King, a title he had inherited not through the original royal line, but through the chaos that followed the coup. No one felt that uncertainty more sharply than Dorian. His father had been one of the chief conspirators in the coup that killed the royal family, a fact known to only a few trusted members of the pack, carefully buried to protect Dorian from the consequences of his father's crimes. But if Elowen truly was alive, if the truth of that night ever came fully to light, Dorian knew his family's role in her parents' deaths would not stay hidden for long. He could not allow that to happen. Late one night, driven by desperation, Dorian approached Alira, in the quiet of the stronghold's western corridor, his expression carefully arranged into something gentle, something trustworthy. "You should leave," he told her quietly, "before anyone gets hurt. There are those in this pack who will never accept you, no matter what Cain says. Your presence here puts you in danger, Alira. Please, for your own safety, go while you still can." Alira studied him carefully, sensing something beneath his words that didn't sit right, though she couldn't quite name it. "Why would my presence put me in danger, Dorian, unless there's something you're not telling me?" His expression flickered, just for a moment, but it was enough. Alira's instincts, sharper than she realized, told her to be careful. She did not run. She went straight to Cain. When Cain heard what had happened, something cold and furious settled over him. He had trusted Dorian for years, relied on him as his closest advisor and friend. The betrayal cut deep, but he could not afford to let emotion cloud his judgment, not when Alira's safety was at stake. He called for a gathering of the full pack the very next evening, in the great hall beneath the ancient stone archways where important matters had always been decided. Dorian, sensing the walls closing in, made one final, desperate attempt. He tried to convince a small group of loyal followers that Alira was a fraud, an imposter sent to destabilize the pack and steal power for herself, hoping to turn opinion against her before the gathering could reveal the truth of his own family's crimes. But Mabel stood before the assembled pack that night and told them everything. She spoke of the night of the coup, the screams, the fire, the desperate nursemaid who carried the infant princess into the forest to save her life before being killed by Dorian's father's own hand. She spoke of the locket, the birthmark, the song that only royal blood would have known. The hall fell utterly silent. Dorian, cornered and out of options, made his last move. He lunged toward Alira in the chaos of the moment, a final, desperate attempt to silence the truth before it could fully unravel his family's legacy. Cain moved faster. He placed himself between Dorian and Alira without hesitation, and what followed was swift and decisive. Cain did not fight out of hatred, but out of duty, out of the fierce need to protect the woman the bond had chosen for him, and the truth that had finally come to light. The confrontation ended quickly, with Dorian defeated, and the pack witnessing firsthand where his loyalties had truly lain all along. In the aftermath, Dorian was stripped of his title and cast out, his father's old crimes finally exposed for all the pack to see. It was not a moment of celebration, but one of quiet, necessary justice, long overdue. Cain turned to Alira in the stillness that followed, his expression softer than the pack had ever seen it. "I know this is not the life you expected to wake up to," he said quietly. "I know all of this is overwhelming, but whatever you decide, whoever you choose to be, I am yours. The bond does not lie, Alira. It never has." Tears filled her eyes, but for the first time since she had stumbled through that storm, they were not tears of fear or confusion. They were tears of relief, of belonging, of finally understanding who she was and where she was meant to be. "I don't need to remember everything to know this feels right," she whispered. "I know that I'm home." The pack did not simply accept her return, they embraced it. Rather than becoming a source of division, Alira's survival became a bridge between two painful chapters of Blackthorn history, the tragedy of the coup and the strength Cain had built in its aftermath. Their bond, both as mates and as rulers, offered something the pack had not felt in over 20 years: true peace. Their mating ceremony was held beneath the same ancient trees where Alira had once begged for shelter, the storm long past, the sky clear and calm above them. The pack gathered not out of obligation, but out of genuine joy, watching as their king and queen were finally, truly united. Cain looked at Alira as she stood before him, radiant and unafraid, and felt something settle deep within his chest, a peace he had never allowed himself to hope for. She was no longer the frightened stranger who had stumbled to his gates in the storm. She was Eowyn, the lost princess found again. She was his mate, chosen by fate long before either of them understood it. And together, they would carry the Blackthorn pack forward, not through the bloodshed of the past, but through the strength of what they had built together. The storm that had once brought her to his door was long gone, but the bond it revealed would last a lifetime.